Hey guys, welcome back to the Wild Courage podcast. Today I am in Sheridan, Wyoming at the Houlihan Ranch with my old friend Buck Brannaman. Thanks for taking the time to do this again.
Glad to do it.
Yeah, so it was like 2 years ago, exactly this same month.
Where's the time go?
I don't know.
If you'd have asked me, I'd have said, well, I remember last year we did this.
Yeah, I was looking at something and it popped up and I was like, that was 2 years ago. Dang.
Yeah.
So if you guys haven't heard Buck's story, I would encourage you. We're in here with a couple horses, which is going to create some authenticity and some cool.
Knew he was going to do that.
Anyway, I would encourage you to go back in our catalog and listen to Buck's story. It's incredible. And if you think you've been through something and don't have hope, go listen to Buck's story and you will come away very hopeful. And today we're going to talk about a couple of different things, but so Buck, you're off the road for the winter?
Yeah, actually for about another 2 weeks, and then I go back to it.
Where are you heading to right off the bat?
Arizona first, which sounds
good plan.
pretty good today, looking at the snow outside, and then Texas, and then I actually come home for a little while, and then back to California. I'm not doing quite as many clinics, so I've got a little bit more time home. So.
Hit some more Brandons?
Yep.
Nice. Good plan.
I want to hit as many Brandons as I can while I can still, be kind of wolfy, throwing my rope before I lose it.
I don't think you'll be one of those guys that all the young guys are like, oh, look at that old timer. And then they're like, damn.
I hope so.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about a couple things, one of which is the Pro-Am Vaquero roping, which you started 10 years ago. Is this year 11?
Yeah, right around there, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, I just thought we were talking about at breakfast what a cool idea it was, and the need for it is people that are interested in ranch roping. These competitions have been going on for a long time, and that's kind of where I got to know you from, was the old Northern Range ranch roping days. And man, if you weren't, there was probably 4 or 5 teams that were the only ones that were ever going to win anything, right?
Yeah. And it when it first got going, it was about the time Joe Walters and me both started doing ranch roping clinics, and people got interested in that, and then up came the ranch roping. So it's kind of evolved. But yeah, for a while, the Northern Range thing and some of the other regional ropings, the way it would go is, there'd be about a half a dozen guys show up, and they were going to win every week. They just took turns.
And they'd trade one partner out, and they'd win first, second, third, fourth.
And then the greener ropers would come, and after a few times coming, they'd think, well, kind of getting tired of donating to these guys, and then their associations would fizzle out, which is what started my idea. I first started talking about it years ago when I was still competing at the Californios. Frank Dominguez and I were talking about it. And that was kind of the idea we had, and we for years said, we should do this. And then finally I just did it. And Bill Reynolds helped me, of course. And then we got a big boost when Riata got involved, because, she kind of organizes everybody anyway. So, so now we're 11 years into it, and it's big, but it's cool because it makes it a welcome place for green ropers to come and compete, see what they need to do to get better. And it's happened more than once. The team that didn't look too good this year, you give them 2 or 3 years, they're in the winner's circle when they come back. They go home and practice.
Yeah, so I've seen it.
It really gets like we were talking about the rocket scientist guy, and all of a sudden he's in the finals.
Yeah.
But it encourages people to get involved doing this, and it preserves the tradition, and that's what it's all about for me. It's the richest ranch roping in the world, and we've never made a dime. In fact, I'd like to say that's how it was, but it's actually cost me a lot of money. I've thrown a lot of money into the deal to make it work. But
you're very generous, and you buy a lot of Calcutta teams, and I've seen you give everything back to the Calcutta teams. A lot, and
But I enjoy the tradition of it, and so we've really tried to support that in a way that it's just going to go on and on and on, and it's there's enough money up that the Cowboys want to come and rope, But that's why we've transitioned into...
Yeah, explain the format.
Well, the format is we have a pool of pros that they show up and they're in this pool and they draw their teams. Everybody comes to town as an amateur as two-man teams. And you can get on, I think, 3 teams now, isn't that
Yep.
right? And then the night before the roping, I draw the pros and tell them their teams. They don't know who they're going to rope with until that night. So there's always a wolf on every team that can really rope. So they'll kind of help the greener ropers and kind of coach them and tell them where to be and kind of how to do things and encourage them. And gosh, now there's some amateurs showing up that I'm thinking, I think I might need to throw you in the pool with the pros.
Yep.
You're roping a little too good.
Yeah.
Which is just what
great.
we wanted it to be.
Yeah.
So it's grown into a kind of a big deal, But that's where Riata got the idea of merging our event with what you're doing. And because what we bring to the table is there's a lot of people coming to the roping now. So we have a captive audience, and your journey that you're on with Wild Courage is something that just fits hand in glove with what we're doing. Because we're not doing it to make money, we're doing it to do a good thing. So why not do 2 good things?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool. We got to sit down this morning and have breakfast and kind of talk about some details of what that might look like of Wild Courage kind of locking arms with you and Riata and the crew that puts on the Pro-Am and make a dent in our cowboy culture and where the community that we really care about that's struggling with whatever it is. Like we were just talking, it's I think some people think that we're another like addiction kind of outfit, and we are, but we're not. Because I know a lot of guys that don't have a drinking problem that are also struggling with things and heartache and loss.
Exactly.
And they don't go to the bottle to find comfort, but they're still hurting.
Yeah.
And they still need help. And I don't know anywhere where there's a place for them to go because they can't go to AA. You know what I mean? They can't go to rehab.
Right.
And so that's really the heartbeat of Wild Courage is like, man, everybody's got a story. Everybody's hurting from loss of some sort or another.
Life is hard.
It's super hard. It's messy.
Everybody has their turn at heartache and stress and sadness. And some people just get lost in that and they don't see their way out the other side. As we talked about a couple of years ago, gosh dang, I've lost some friends. I know you have too, to taking their own life that shouldn't have happened.
Yep.
And then you look back and you think, gosh dang, I wish I'd called him that day. But you didn't know. You didn't know. And maybe the last time you talked to him, hell, he sounded good. Because a lot of times they'll put up a pretty good facade.
Yep.
When on the inside they're getting eaten alive, So, and like we talked about, country people, whether it's ranchers, farmers, cowboys, whatever, that kind of a man is prone to be too proud to ask for help because it infers that they're weak and out of control.
That's it.
And you're raised to, if you're a rural person, you're raised to be tough and self-sufficient, and you don't need anybody. That rugged independence. And that's all a good thing, but at the same rate, I wouldn't say everybody needs help, but it'd surprise you how many people do.
Yeah, isolation's not good. I think we were at the base level, we were created for connection, right?
Yeah.
We're not created to do this life alone. And unfortunately, in rural America, a lot of what you do to make a living and what you love, and for good reasons, you spend a lot of time alone and are kind of disconnected. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing with, just these stories like yours.
Yeah, whether you're running a tractor or you're in a cow camp taking care of a bunch of cows or whatever it might be, Yeah, people can say, I'm fine being alone. I've heard that song and dance before. That's not how God made us. But there's been a few times where over the years where I've even told Mary, because, it seems like when I'm on the road doing clinics that it is just glamorous and romantic, and I'm surrounded by people all the time that admire me, want to be around me. And I've told her a few times over the years, I'm probably the loneliest public person you'll ever know.
Yep.
And I don't know if she understood that. I think she did. But it's true. You can be surrounded by people but be alone.
That's a great point. Because a lot of the people I know that have taken their lives, they weren't on a cow camp.
Right.
They were surrounded by people, but they weren't being seen or heard. And I think the shame and guilt of maybe what they were struggling with, they thought, one, nobody would understand, and I don't want to burden anybody, and or I've tried. I've heard this a lot. I've tried to tell somebody, and they didn't know. They avoided me because we don't know what to do. Yeah. And I think that's the power of what we're kind of seeing around our fires is like I can't fix anybody.
Yeah.
But I can sit with you in it, and I can walk with you through the messiness and heartache of life.
Well, I think of some of the friends that I've lost that took their own life. If I'd have been there that day, we would have sat down and had a visit, and it would have all been avoided if you'd have been there in the moment to just hear them, But that's hard to do. So the other part of the equation is, how do you get that person to go and find someone to listen, to help them?
Yeah.
That's the hard part.
It is hard part because there's such a stigma around therapy and getting help.
Yeah.
Especially in our community, right? It's like you mentioned earlier, it's such a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
And I can tell you right now, I wouldn't be alive without it. I wouldn't.
I believe it.
I've had a gun in my mouth. I played Russian roulette for 5 days straight. Like I get the depths of the being that close to the line. And I think sometimes we want a big miracle. And I think sometimes that miracle looks like God putting certain people in our lives at the right time that can help us manage and walk through this journey.
Yeah.
And there isn't any shame in it.
Right.
Why would there be shame in something that happened to you or you didn't cause? Like, it's not your fault.
Yeah, it's like, it is about taking responsibility, for ourselves and for our own well-being. It's like, can I tell you a joke real quick here?
Of course.
It's like there was this this farmer, his very faithful man. He went to church on Sunday, and he said, Lord, I'm just about to give her up. He said, my tractor blew up, and I'm just getting ready to harvest, and my dog died. And he said, now it looks like the hail's going to come in and wipe out my crop. And I'm so discouraged. I don't know what to do. And this big voice come into the church and said, son, just have faith, work hard. Everything will be all right. So he went home to the farm and just went to work. And he came back the next Sunday, and he said, God, I don't know. I did what you said. Well, my barn burned down, and my daughter got pregnant from the neighbor guy, and my workhorse died. I'm just about to give it up. This is all I can bear. Big voice come into the church again and said, son, you just have faith, work hard. Everything will be all right. So he said, all right, God. He went home and he worked harder than he's ever worked. Went back to church the next Sunday, and he said, God, I don't know. He said, my wife run off with a neighbor guy. My truck blew up on the way here. I had to walk here. And he said, my crops failed. He said, God, I've been so faithful. I've worked so hard. I don't know how you could let this happen to one of your faithful servants. And this big voice come into the church and said, I don't know. There's just something about you just pisses me off.
I've felt that before. That same thing, and I've wondered the same thing. That's awesome.
Sort of a modern day version of Job.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, Job. That's funny. Yeah, it's a big topic, and like at the Pro-Am last year, we kind of had a little powwow, and what excited me about us kind of joining forces in this was the first thing you said is we're not just interested in raising awareness.
Right.
And I'm like, yes, because there's so many well-intentioned organizations that are already doing that. Mm-hmm. And there's plenty of wealthy people that feel good and check the box like we're raising awareness. Yeah. And at the core of what we're trying to do with Wild Courage is we're not.
What are you going to do about it?
Let's do something about it. And we're not afraid of messy.
Right.
We're not afraid of pain, heartache, dysfunction, and the ass kickings that life hands out.
Yeah.
Again, we don't know. We can't fix you, but we'll sit with you in it. And we have some really good folks on our team that do counseling and that we're sending to, and we are a nonprofit. And like I was sharing with you at breakfast, where good counseling starts at $150 an hour.
Yeah. And
on cowboy wages with no insurance, you can't afford it. And so that was one of the first things we started doing with our funds that people would send us is we're paying for guys to get help.
Yeah.
And if you can get on Facebook, you can get help. If you have internet, you can get help.
That's cool.
And we have the right guys, especially Britton, who gets our industry and gets our community and is cowboyed and been in the horse world for 30 years. Mm-hmm. And then he chose a different path. And so he really has a place of compassion and understanding and is a super soft place for guys to land.
Right.
So that's been a fun partnership.
Yeah.
But that's just one of the things that we're kind of doing to not just raise awareness.
Right.
And get the word out in our community. Like, you don't have to go this alone.
Right.
Like you mentioned earlier, I'm tired of my friends killing themselves or drinking themselves to death, and it continues to happen. It just happened last weekend in Elko. Yeah. And it's heartbreaking, and we got to do something about it. And I don't know what else to do but this. So I'm excited about the Pro-Am and this year. And again, thank you for the opportunity.
It'll be fun, and it'll be a fun journey. And we just thought, we've got a ton of people coming to this now. That in order to get the word out for what you're doing, you need an audience. Obviously, this podcast really helps. But that event will help too, because that's the very audience you're trying to target.
Yep, that's it. And so, I think it's going to be good. And I'm super excited and grateful to you and Rietta for bringing us in and joining forces with our mission. So thank you for that.
That's our pleasure.
We thought we'd try something fun. I've listened to some of the podcasts you've been on, and generally people like talking to you about horses and what you do because who has more knowledge, about that. And so I thought it'd be fun to throw some names at you for you to share a little story about, or something that maybe you haven't, shared a lot about. But the first guy on the list, obviously, is Ray Hunt.
Well, probably an important thing about Ray, obviously, in my opinion, he's probably the greatest horseman in the last 500 years. But aside from that, I've thought hard about how hard it must have been for him to bring this approach to horsemanship to the world, how his shoulders were broad enough to do that, considering the conventional wisdom was completely against him. And I think I understand. And it sort of relates to what we've been talking about, you see, because Ray Hunt was born with a club foot, a birth defect. Now, you think about this 80 years ago, a kid in school with a club foot, you were treated like a freak. There was no sympathy or empathy for that. You were a monster. You were made fun of.
Oh, yeah, constantly.
You were an outcast. And Ray survived that, and he was a farm kid. They worked horses, but he was a farmer, but he always wanted to be a cowboy. Well, he went to Nevada and became an unbelievable cowboy, great bronc rider, a great horseman in his own right, but he was pretty much doing things old school. But he had broken out of that outcast situation because he was such a respected cowboy. He was such a good hand. Nobody cared about his club foot then.
Yeah.
But you can imagine the loneliness he felt and the rejection he felt as a kid, which made him stronger.
Resilient.
And then he became this amazing cowboy. And then he met Tom Dorrance, and Tom was teaching Ray things that kind of went against the grain of everything everybody was doing. Now Ray was an outcast again. And he was hated for a while, dismissed, made fun of, everything he went through as a kid. But that prepared him to have the fortitude to take what he knew was good for the horse to the world. And he didn't need validation or people to pat him on the back. He knew what he was doing in his mind was right. And so it's like his younger life prepared him to be someone with broad enough shoulders to do this, no matter what anybody thought. And I just thought, that's one of those deals, if you consider the entirety of his life, that's one of those stories that is like When God Winks. It's the title of a book, but that's the gist of it. When you begin to understand things, a series of events that happened, and then God's like, yeah.
I can use that.
Yeah. So that is what prepared him to have broad enough shoulders to be absolutely devoted to what Tom Dorrance had taught him. And I don't think it could have happened any other way.
That's a great perspective I would have never thought of. I think the hope in that is if you're going through a little bit of hell, keep going, because you never know what beauty and what wonderful thing can come out of diversity, right?
Think of what it turned into. Gosh, I mean, he didn't even realize it toward the end of his life, but in his own way, he changed the world of horses, and a lot of people who come in contact with horses now, they do things, they don't even know where it came from, but it's the only way they figured to do it. And it all started from Ray and, of course, Tom Dorrance.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Before we get to the next one, it's like 1A. Is Jayton really a better golfer than you, Jayton Lord?
No. He must have been drinking when he told you that.
Yeah, he talked some other smack too, but that was one of the things he takes a lot of pride in, is that he beats you on the golf course consistently.
Yeah, no.
I didn't think it was true, but I thought I would just...
Yeah, no, it's not true. But he's a young guy, so...
There's hope.
Yeah, you got to not crush his dreams.
Okay.
So.
Well, I'll let him hold on to that for a while. Yeah. Another guy on the list, our good friend Bob Blackwell. I'm sure you got a good Bob Blackwell story, because anybody that knows Bob's got a good Bob Blackwell story.
Absolutely, I do. First of all, Bob Blackwell is one of the funnest cowboys to ever make a circle with. One of the funnest guys. He's been one of my dear friends for 45 years, at least. And just fun guy to be around. Just a great guy. I'd do anything for him. So one winter, he was in between jobs, which Bob was kind of...
That's his career.
Noted for that. I was telling you a while ago, I asked him one time, I said, damn, Bob, because he could just have a bad weather report in the morning on the radio, and he'd roll his bed and be gone. Nobody'd even know why. I said, how many jobs have you had? And he said, one year I had kind of a record year. I had 27 jobs in 1 year. How do you even do that? But he did.
Yep.
So anyway, he was in between jobs. I was living over by Bozeman, riding colts and just kind of trying to do, I guess you'd call it clinics. I was doing little lessons locally for people, just trying to keep the lights on, you know. So, and I had kind of when I had bought this house, they forgot to unhook the HBO. So I had HBO
for free.
Yeah,
it's a big deal
free.
Back then, man.
This is in the 80s, mid 80s, and so Bob, he spent the whole winter on my couch watching HBO, and Charlie and Cindy Green, you remember them?
Yep.
They called me at one point and said, "Hey, we heard Bob is staying at your place, and we just wanted to make sure. I'm sure you got everything taken care of, but we wanted to make sure that at least once a week you roll him over so he doesn't get bed sores." So one morning, I'm going to do this little class just locally there by Four Corners in this indoor arena. And, probably had 10, 15 people in it. And Bob, he decides he's going to show up. He's going to get off the couch. And he shows up there and just kind of stand around. And this one gal, and you might know her, Dina Rodewald. Mm-mm. Well, they're from eastern Montana, I believe, her and her husband. She had this dun horse. Like I say, this 40 years ago, but I remember it like it's yesterday. Some snow slid off the roof, and you know what that does a lot of times to something that's a little bit
tight,
bothered. Well, this horse went to bucking. He bucked all the way down the arena, and I mean, he was getting with the program, and she's riding him. And he got halfway back up the other side. So, she was on a good 12, 13 seconds. And then finally he shook her loose, bucked her off, and then here comes Bob. By now he's chinked up,
ready for battle.
He's ready, and he comes in there making his entrance like only Bob can do. Got his hat on sideways. He's getting serious when his hat kind of goes
cocks,
like that. He's getting serious, and I'm watching, and he takes his horse, and now the horse has just had a little bit of drama. He doesn't even so much as lead it past him once or twice. He just tucks it, McCartney in his belt, and he just steps on. I'm like, oh. Well, the horse is still troubled, So Bob, he kind of tries to get him to go, and he doesn't go, and then Bob kind of puts the wood to him. That horse, too, jumps him. Bob went right over his head, did a complete flip, landed on his back, knocked all the air out of him, and... So, Dina rode him quite a bit longer than Bob did, but gosh dang, Bob didn't have much of a chance. The horse was all practiced up. And then Bob landed on his back, and I rode over. I said, "You all right?" And he's like, yeah. I said, "Bob, you got to quit doing that." "Quit doing what?" I said, "You keep flying over its head like that, and we're not going to be able to get a bridle on that son of a bitch." I was just being funny, you know. Heck, we were together all the time, partied together and everything. Well, he was upset that I said, and so he didn't talk to me for about 4 days.
He didn't come back to your house?
Oh no, he was on my couch.
he
just didn't think he should talk to me.
Oh, that's awesome!
What a good hand! He's a good hand, a good roper, and always was good with colts. And, he's anybody that ever came in contact with Bob appreciated him as he was just a good guy. I love him.
Yeah, that's funny. I was wondering where he got that couch surfing from, because I think he landed on about every couch I ever had to at some point or another. But I was telling you this real quick story about Bob. Is he had his best bridle horse, Rowdy. He was probably about 18 at the time.
I remember Rowdy, yeah.
That sucker would get cold back in the spring at Brandon out of the blue and buck him off every now and then. And I remember one spring I hadn't seen him. I'll talk to him all winter. I'm like, "Hey, how's Rowdy?" Because I knew it was Brandon season up in Montana. And he's like, "It's pretty good." I'm like, "Oh, yeah? Why is that?" And he said, "Well, we have a deal." I'm like, "Oh, really? What's that deal?" He said, "I don't ride him anymore, and he don't buck me off anymore." He had a lot of good.
Oh, he had such a good sense of humor.
Yeah, I love Bob. Yeah. The next guy I was thinking about was old Ray Harmon.
Ray Harmon, one of the best guys I've ever known. I don't know that I'll ever meet anybody quite like Ray Harmon. He was something. He was a lineman by trade. When I first met him was in Acton, California. He shows up at my clinic. He had been, those linemen, they kind of travel all over just like buckaroos, when there's a storm or something and they got to hang wire or climb power poles, they're there. So he happened to be working in L.A. at the time. And he'd heard about this guy doing the clinic. And Ray always rode, And he showed up at my clinic with this guy, had hair clear down to his butt. And his wife, her name was Kelly. And she was just kind of a hippie chick, too. And it just didn't look right, because Ray always looked like your classic Arizona cowboy. And here he's with these two hippies, But I guess they gave him a ride to the clinic or something. And that's where I first met him. And and he knew I was trying to put this all together. The threesome didn't fit,
Yeah.
That's where I first met him. And we got to be such good friends. And we branded 1 million calves together over the years. And he rode with me. And he was one of those guys. All the guys just loved spending time with him. But all the women loved him.
Oh, yeah. So kind.
Oh, he
funny.
would charm every woman he ever met.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was quite the guy, Ray. The story about him and his friend in school, he had so many stories and adventures that he'd done. I could go on the rest of the day about Ray Harmon's stories. But one that was really funny was he's like 14 years old, and he and his buddy, I guess, bored, and they didn't there was a little local roping arena there and had a little bar by it. They didn't like how that guy was taking care of his horses, so they decided to steal him, and they were going to go to Mexico with him. Now, usually it went the other way around.
Yeah.
Years ago, they'd steal horses in Mexico. Nope, they went the other way.
Thought it'd be a better deal.
And so they took off with these horses, and then they decided, well, hell, if we're going to go that far, this is Tucson, and it's quite a ways to Mexico. They figured if we're going to go that far, we might as well pick up some others along the way. So they had this big group of horses. He and his buddy were driving to Mexico. And Bucky said, I'm not positive, but I think that's the last time a actual posse was ever assembled in Arizona to come after us. And the first night they were gone, they were starting to get really hungry, and they came upon this housing development. They put these horses in these model homes, in the bedrooms, in the living rooms, and locked the door. And then they sneaked across the valley to this house, kind of looking for food. And he said, "It's the dangest thing. We got there. I don't know what the deal was, but there was a full meal of spaghetti on the table, just steaming hot, and nobody's there. It's like maybe somebody had a medical emergency or something." And he said, "It's all right there." He said, "Me and my buddy went in there and we just ate our heads off. We were just bloated when we come out of there." He said, "Then we went back, spent the night there with the horses. The next morning, got them out of the homes, headed for Mexico." And he said, about 3 hours later, we got surrounded by the police.
They caught up.
Yeah, and he said, "And I finished out my high school experience at Fort Grant." And he said, "My mom and dad were sure disappointed in me over that."
Yeah, he had the best stories.
Oh, he did.
And it's fun to run into people that knew him from all different stages of his kind of life. I ran into somebody last summer that knew him that was a lineman with him.
Yeah.
And, oh my gosh, the fighting stories.
Oh,
he was a character.
They said he was the toughest man in Tucson, Arizona, which is no small order. But he was, you remember at his funeral, there was some guys came from Phoenix, some Japanese guys, that he was part of a dojo up there, and he was you'd never know it, but he was a black belt in karate, and they said he was a bad dude to get around.
That's crazy.
And, all these Asian guys come to his funeral where all the cowboys were, and they loved him.
Yeah, everyone did. This is one thing that I always appreciate about him, because he would come up, I would put on some ranch opens in Prescott, and it was a mix of, more of the buckaroo type guys with long ropes, but They worked a bunch enough up there. A bunch of them Arizona cowpunchers would come, and it took them about 5 minutes to figure out, Johnny Blocker and all that, because those guys
handy
super
guys.
handy.
Yeah.
And they would all kind of sit over there, and all the buckaroo guys would be over here. And Ray, he would beeline right for those Arizona guys, and he'd be right in the middle of them. And you know what I mean? That's just kind of who he was. And by the time it was over, everybody was hanging out with everybody, and all those cowpunchers loved Ray. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. Great guy.
The other guy next on my little list here is our friend Pat Puckett.
Pat. Yeah. Pat's the reason I'm here on this ranch. I was doing clinics in Sheridan County here for quite a few years. And oddly enough, at one point, Mary was going back and forth to her family in Colorado, and I lived in Montana. So it's 12 hours, to back and forth. And just on a whim, she said, we ought to just move to Sheridan. And it's not so far to my parents and not so far from your family. Well, she's learned over the years to be careful what she says, So we're in North Carolina doing a clinic, and Pat sends me the real estate package on this place. And I made an offer. I bought it sight unseen.
Oh, dang.
Never looked at it. And so a couple of days later, Mary and I are having coffee. We're somewhere in the east, and I said, hey, you want to see your new ranch? I just moved all the pictures in front of her, and she's like, you did what? I said, well, you said you wanted to move to Sheridan County, so we're moving once we get off the road. She's like, well, I was just talking. I said, well, be careful what you say. Yeah. So we ended up buying this place, and I knew the country, knew what it was like, and probably the only smart thing I've ever done financially in my life
was buy this place.
Was buy this place in '93.
Oh, yeah, because it's changed around here big time.
It's changed a bunch. But Pat put me onto this place, and so we got to be really good friends, and we run cattle together and branded 1 million yearlings. We'd always have a yearling branding every year, and gosh, we roped together and had a good time. And then he eventually went south. And I talked to him a while back. He's in California. Sounds good.
I talked to him quite a bit, yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, he's
doing good. Hadn't talked to him for quite a little while, but we visited here a couple of months ago, had a nice talk.
Oh, good.
Yeah. There's a funny guy, too.
Oh, his sense of humor is so dry that it's fun to watch people react that don't know him.
Yeah.
Because, man, it takes them by surprise at first. But I find him to be hilarious. But that's how I met him, was when I first came into your roping clinic, and I had my teepee in the parking lot at Bob King's in the dirt, and Pat was like, you're my kind of people. And he's been a mentor and a friend to me ever since that day.
Yeah. He's had a good run. He's well-liked. And
I thought I would jump off on some of the guy on this list that you've got to spend time with that none of us would ever have access to do. A lot of these guys I know also, they're in the cowboy world, but you've got to spend some time with Robert Redford when you made the Horse Whisperer movie and were a consultant on that.
Yeah.
How was that?
Oh, it was fun. The fact that, I'm not, even at this age, I've been fairly successful in the horse world for quite a little while. But I haven't forgotten. It's kind of embarrassing to say, but, I started out kind of trailer trash. I did. Probably whatever is less than trailer trash is actually where I started out, because it took a while to get into a trailer. But, so, pretty damn humble beginnings. And then to flash forward 20-some years, and then I'm sitting there having, coffee with Redford and telling him how to walk and talk and how not to look, like he wasn't a cowboy. It was quite a contrast.
I imagine it would have to be super surreal, right? To like how the
crazy.
The places.
It's a $150 million movie. There's guys who work in the movie business their whole life and just dream of getting to work on a movie like that.
Yeah.
And my first one is doing a deal with Redford. But he's not from our world, obviously. He's a movie guy. But I'll say this, he's a very kind man. And we would have dinner quite a bit in Big Timber in those days. And I was always appreciated. Someone would see him in the Grand there in Big Timber. And he would get up and go across the room and introduce himself. And he was never dismissive. Like you see some of these damn actors and people that think they're important, they're almost angry at people because the people want to meet him or shake their hand or get a picture. He understood that those people are what made him not to have a real job.
Some humility.
So, so he was always kind. I liked how kind he was to people. I appreciated that about him. And, it was a good experience. I never got delusional about thinking I was going to be, in the movie business.
When's the next one or anything like that?
Yeah, no, I was pretty real, knowing full well that all this excitement was going to end and the movie would be in the bargain bin at Walmart,
I remember hearing you say that one time.
Sure enough.
What a great perspective to, be open-handed, right? Like, this is great, but when this is over, I'm going to be doing what I was doing before, and I'm going to be the same guy.
And surprisingly, once the movie was all over and wrapped up, most of those people that were on the movie set didn't give a diddly damn about me and probably never thought about me again.
Yeah, that's the reality of
That's fine.
World, yeah.
That goes both ways.
I don't think we could probably not have Tom Dorrance on this list.
Right. Well, Tom, he's really the godfather of all of this. And, he used to say about Ray, he said, when I first started working with Ray, I could ask him to do the impossible, and then Ray could do it. And he said, then I had to rethink things, knowing that most people that I would be helping were not Ray Hunt. So he said that really made me put some thought into it. And Tom said, when I started out as a young guy, he said, I just knew I didn't have the physical strength and stature to be able to do what the other guys were, because he was not a big man. He said, really, I just started doing the opposite, what everybody else was doing, just to see if it'd work. And he said, it'd surprise you how often that worked.
Yeah.
But he was a genius. The first time I ever met him, and I have a pretty good memory too, but not like Tom Dorrance.
Really?
First time I ever met him was July 17th, 1979 at the fairgrounds in Bozeman. And my friend Mel Obergewich, who just passed away, which I'm very sad about, he was the cow boss on this outfit I was trying to get a job at. And he said, hey, you want to meet Tom Dorrance? And I was like, whatever. I didn't know who he was. I'd only seen Ray Hunt that day because I was there trying to talk to the boss to get a job. I didn't give a damn about Ray Hunt either at the time because I was young and cocky and thought I was like all that. So he introduced me to Tom, and at the same time, there's a little group around Tom. He got introduced to TJ Vitor of the Vitors from over by Phillipsburg. And Tom said, I know. He was older then. He said, I know you. And then she kind of patronized Tom a little bit. She said, oh, no, Tom, we've never met. You don't know me. And Tom said, I didn't say that. And everybody went, whoop. He said, I know you. He said, in 1969, June 21st, I saw you on TV. You were running for Miss College Rodeo America. There was like a 5-minute piece on the news, and he happened to be in the bunkhouse at the Flying D. I know the bunkhouse. I know where he was sitting. And they had a little piece on the Rodeo Queen contest. And he said, by the way, now this was 10 years before. He said, by the way, did you ever get that gray horse to take a right lead? And she was just blown away.
Yeah, dang.
So then, flash forward 30 years. I'm having lunch with Tom. And Tom just brought it up. He said, hey, remember when I met you in Bozeman? I was helping Ray with the clinic there. And he said, you were 17. You graduated from Harrison High School, I think. Dang. I said, yeah. He said, yeah, you were going to go to work for Madison River Cattle Company. And he said, yeah. He said, I remember that. I said, Tom, I was nobody. Nobody would have any reason to be interested in who I was. How can you remember that? And Tom said, Buck, I remember every minute of my life. And I was just stunned. I said, really? He said, yes. He said, I remember every minute of my life. Which explained his genius. Everything that ever happened with a horse, good or bad, it didn't matter. It was recorded.
Wow.
It was there. So that's how he was able to gain and retain so much knowledge.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, and had he directed his life toward something else, a more mainstream,
He'd been a billionaire,
science or something, well, there wouldn't have been a person on the planet didn't know who he was. He would have changed the world in another way.
Yeah.
Thank goodness he was into horses.
Yeah, right? What a gift.
But he was, it had a photographic memory. Yeah.
That's amazing. I only got to be with him one time, and it was at a clinic in Cave Creek, Arizona, and he was kind of, at his cane and had to sit most of the time. But I went over and, met him. He was so generous and kind and signed his book and wrote a poem in it. And there was a horse standing next about 10 feet away that was pawing, and he had his cane. He said, will you pick up that rock? And he's real particular about it. And I handed him probably 8 rocks. And he's like, okay, thanks. And we just talked, and he was right, whatever we were talking about. Yeah. Every once in a while, he'd reach over with his thumb and flip that rock up in the air, and it would land right on the back of that horse. And that horse, and then it'd get to pawn. I'm not kidding. If I wouldn't have been there, I wouldn't have believed it. By the time he was done,
he was standing like that horse.
That horse quit pawing.
Yeah.
And he never even looked at him. He just kind of flipped that rock up and it'd land on his back. And I was like, that's a whole nother level.
Yeah.
Like just the way he thought about things.
He just thought about things just differently. That's where sometime this isn't the place, but sometime we'll talk about it. But years ago, I started thinking to myself, these horses that when you start them that are, kind of awkward and they are a little inclined to drop their hind lead when you first start riding them. I thought about that just all the years driving down the road. I thought, I bet Tom would find a way to make use of that. He wouldn't look at it as a negative. And I thought, well, if you really think about it, when he drops that hind lead, he's halfway through a lead change and you got the hardest part done. So I spent a couple of years working on, I actually took one of my good horses that knew how to change leads and got him to quit and taught him how to drop his hind lead. Took me 2 years. I never told anybody really much about what I was doing. They'd ask me and I'd be like, I got a project going on. I can't talk about it right now. But I figured I know how to use that now. And so now I was just helping Riata with a horse there yesterday, and she's inclined to do it. And I said, don't kill that. Don't kill that in that horse. We're going to use that. Just leave it in there. And I showed her how to keep the horse on the lead. But I said, don't kill that. We need that.
That's fascinating.
So, yeah.
That's fun. That's a whole different, deep level.
By the time I started working on that, I never got a chance to talk to Tom about it before he died. I'm kind of sad about that.
Yeah. But that's cool that's kind of something that you think about him in that mental frame of like,
yeah, he took me to that place
to
think about it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Don and Val Chase is the next folks on our list that I know we both have a great love and fondness for.
Oh, great people. Gosh, they've been going to my clinics and putting on my clinics for, I just don't even remember when they weren't a part of my life. They've been there all along through all the years in California. And, of course, my heart aches for Val, with ALS. And she's so tough and so strong. most people don't survive anywhere near that long when they have Lou Gehrig's disease. And she's still hanging in, and it's been so hard for Donnie because we always figured, all of us that knew him, we always figured it was going to be Val taking care of Don toward the end of his life. Because, you know, she's 6 foot tall and strong and tough and energetic and
beautiful,
handy, you know, and then this ALS is just so debilitating, and it's just, my heart just aches for what they've both gone through over the last, 5 or 6 years,
maybe
a long
7. Time.
And, and a lot of us, of course, tried to help them the best we could. It's been quite a struggle. But I think about him all the time, and I'm going to see him. I'm going to see him in April.
Oh, nice.
So I'm going to get on the road a little bit early so I can go just hang out at their place and see Dawn and then go with him to see Val at the hospital.
Yeah, they're the type of folks that once you get to know them and you're in, man, they're your family.
Yeah.
And you know it.
Yeah.
You know it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a lot of fun at their place, and Don cracked open the safe of goods one time. And man,
he's got quite a collection of bits and spurs and.
Yeah, and for my wedding present, he gave me a really cool bit.
Really?
Install. Yeah, it's pretty special. It hangs in my office.
Pretty cool. Between him and Chuck Reed, they have about as nice a collection as anybody.
The next guy on here, I just, the Pro-Am this year, I was sitting next to Gabe, and you were kind of loosely talking to Gabe about Eddie Vedder.
Yeah.
And I didn't know the context of that, but as a music fan, this is a two-parter. Like, what kind of music do you like first? Like, when you're on the road by yourself.
I pretty much listen to country music, you know. And I'll listen to the highway some and prime country, you know. Sometimes outlaw country. They get a little bit stupid on there sometimes.
I agree. It used to be better.
It just depends on who you hit them at the right time. And then some of it's just good old David Allan Coe, Waylon Jennings, good stuff. And then other times you're like, what in the hell are you guys doing? But, Gabe was kind of blown away. I didn't realize he didn't know, but I'd said, I just talked to Eddie Vedder. And he's like, what? You know him? I said, yeah. So anyway, I didn't know really damn thing about Pearl Jam, you know, but they used Eddie Vedder's song, Breathe, on the documentary.
Which is such a great song.
The last sequence of the documentary. And then there was a slideshow while it was playing, and a very poignant slide was me and my foster mom walking away from the camera, kind of at the end of a day of me doing a clinic, holding hands. And so I traveled all over America doing these Q&As after the film would play. And, well, shit, every time I'd see it, I would just be bawling like a baby. And I mean, and of course, you know, then you got snot running out your nose and you're crying. And I got to where I'd go out on the street and just time it to where I didn't have to watch it. And that song really got to me, you know. It was just so fitting for the situation. So they had me lined up to be on the David Letterman show. And so I'm in my dressing room, and this was kind of interesting. I'm at the Ed Sullivan Theater, and the first kind of, oh, wow moment, the assistant that was kind of with me in there, I said, this place looks really familiar. I said, is this where they used to do that show, What's My Line, years ago? It was a game show where they had celebrities that try to guess what you did for a living. He said, yeah. I said, this was the dressing room me and my brother were in when I was 7 years old.
No way.
Yeah.
When you were doing the trick roping?
Yep. Same dressing room.
Wow.
That just totally blew my mind, you know.
That's crazy.
So it's like 50 years later. And then knock on the door, and it's our middle daughter, Kristen. she shows up. I'm thinking, oh, that's cool. She thinks it's kind of cool. Her stepdad's going to be on Letterman. She shows up. Hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm glad you came. She said, I came here to meet Eddie Vedder. I'm like, did I miss him? She said, I want you to go knock on his door. I want to meet Eddie Vedder.
And was he the musical act that night?
He was going to be on that night with me.
And this is way before the documentary, right?
It was going right then.
Oh, okay.
It was being played in the theaters. And Cameron Diaz was there too. That's another story. But I told Kristen, I said, I'm not going to go knock on his door. I said, I'm not going to be a dork. There's no way. Well, and she's kind of all pissed off, like, well, why?
That's why I'm here.
Why'd I even come?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, to see me. She's like, oh, I just really want to meet Eddie Vedder. And then a couple of minutes later, I said, Kristen, get that, would you? She opens the door, Eddie Vedder.
No way.
Yeah. So he comes in, and he said, I don't want to bother you, but my wife is really into horses. She's this beautiful Spanish lady, really pretty. She's really into horses, and she wanted to meet you while we were here. I said, well, come on in. And I got to visiting with him. And of course, Kristen's just all Twitter-pated, you know. And I said, I got to be honest with you. I don't know a Pearl Jam song, if you ask me. I couldn't tell you one. But I said, there's more to it. I'm going to tell you this. There's only a few songs that you'll hear in your life that moves your soul to where if you heard it 10,000 times, you'd never get tired of it. That every time you hear it, you're moved. And I said, that's what your song did for me. And he said, you know what? It's almost more cool that you're not a Pearl Jam fan.
Sure.
That you said that.
Well, it means more because you're not fanboying to it.
Yeah. He said, that's amazing. So anyway, we visited, and we've been friends ever since. We talk a few times a year, and we text back and forth, and I see him once in a while. When I'm in the Seattle area, and he's a good guy. He's a good guy.
That's cool.
Yeah.
How I watched that clip on YouTube of you being on Letterman, and I was like, you didn't appear to be like nervous. I felt like you were the same guy sitting next to Letterman that I had known you to be at a roping or at a clinic or when I've had dinner with you in the past after roping or we're watching a basketball game. And I was like, that's some nerves of steel, man, because
I was a little bit concerned before I went on because I have seen over the years, I've seen Letterman take someone who was maybe a very serious person and kind of make a little bit of a clown out of him.
Yeah.
For the sake of humor. I mean,
Sure.
That's what he's getting paid to do.
Yep.
But kind of humiliate him a little bit.
Yep.
And I'm sure he probably didn't intend to, but nevertheless, that's how it worked out. So I was guarded about that. If you watch the whole thing, the first couple of minutes, I was a little guarded because I was thinking, your move, because I had a plan
if it came
where I was going to take it, and I won't mention it here, but I had an arsenal of things that I was going to mention about him.
Yeah, because you have insight.
So I had a plan, and then we kind of clicked because he's from Montana, has a place there. We kind of clicked, and gosh dang, I really enjoyed him.
I thought he was super honoring to you.
He was really good. He couldn't have been more respectful. I was so happy about that. And we had a really nice visit, and I went away really liking the guy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was nice. It was a nice thing.
Yeah,
and that was kind of toward the end of his show. I don't think he was on much longer after that.
He wasn't.
But, yeah, good guy.
Yeah, that's cool.
Good guy.
I was just sitting around here yesterday watching you, and, there's a lot of folks here right now. You guys are starting a bunch of cults like I think you historically do this time of year.
Yep, every year, yep.
And to see Gabe and Rietta here, and their sweet little girl.
Yeah.
And I just was watching you watch them, and I thought, this is it. The things that really matter. And I just saw this like sense of like contentment and joy over you watching your daughter and her family.
Yeah.
And people that work for them.
Yeah.
Like kind of taking what you've fought hard for and been on the road doing a lifetime of in your indoor barn. It's blizzarding out today. And so the last person kind of on the list, and it could, is Rietta. And I just wanted to give you some space to share what this is like having her close to home. And
well, it especially means a lot now, in her earlier life, in the summers, of course, she would go with me with her little pony, and she'd go to all the clinics in the summers when she wasn't in school, and that was some of the most treasured time of my life. But at the same rate, I missed out on a lot of stuff being on the road because of what I do for a living. Times when she was in school and Mary was home by herself. And if I think about it too much, it makes me a little sad. I missed out on a lot of really cool things, with her growing up, but was also in on a lot of cool things too, because we loved the same things, and our summers were amazing, and I'd be, of course, home some in the wintertime too, but there were a lot of birthdays I missed, a lot of different things that I missed that I can't get back. When Riata was born, I missed that. I was in California. She was supposed to be born a week later. Had it all planned out. And then all of a sudden, Mary's having her, and I'm in Malibu, California doing a clinic, and I can't get out of town quick enough to get up here. So I missed that, and I'll regret that my whole life. But I can't do anything about it. She was born fine and healthy, and everybody, it worked out. So, that's just one of those things. Life isn't perfect. There's plenty of people in the military that don't see their children born. There's, lots of people that have to work away from home in order to do it. So, I don't cry in my beer much about it, but I sure wish I could have been here. But she's been the joy of my life. She's just really made my life complete.
And I kind of sense that just because I get it, because I've had to travel a lot and I've missed a lot of things that I feel that same weight of. And that's why I felt like yesterday, I was like, this feels so redemptive.
Yeah.
That you get this time together, and she has her own family now, and they're doing great big things, and you get to join in with them, and it's like, it's not too late.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And you get, you don't get that time back, but you get this bonus redemptive time of like doing things that matter together. And
you got to learn how to live in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Kind of as we land this plane, when we talked 2 years ago, you were just kind of like gearing up to do the Buck channel. And I just wanted to kind of check in and see where that's been and headed. And
well, like what we were talking about, that the whole COVID thing made me realize that maybe I couldn't keep on doing clinics on the road in the way that I'd done for decades. And then I became concerned about, well, what if it's over? What am I leaving behind for all those people that were so loyal to me and rode with me all those years? What are they going to have when I'm not here? That's what made me come up with the idea for the Buck channel. And so I've tried to get as many videos as I can, anywhere from 5, 10, 15 minutes, short videos. And by the time it's all done, I'm going to have 700 or 800.
Oh, nice.
That's my plan. We're up to a couple hundred now. And so we launched it, and there's, a few thousand people signed up. And
so is it like a subscription?
Yeah. Yep. And so they could be having a specific problem on their horse and go through the menu and go, thunk, I need to hear about that. And then they can watch their phone for 5 minutes, go back to work, maybe get an answer that'll help them. So that's really going to, I guess when it's all said and done, that's going to be one of the few things that really is evidence that I was ever here.
Well, I can see from your vantage point where you might think that, but trust me, there will be a lot more than that. Because of you got a granddaughter that's going to be grown up and merged in this, And
Yeah.
I think as we talk a lot about in Wild Courage is like, what if we get healthy and whole enough that the conversation starts becoming about our ceiling being our kids' floors, right? And how far can they take this? And then when you really can get into that line of thinking, it's like we start talking about our grandkids that we don't have, and some of us do. But it's like to start thinking generationally. Like, what are we putting our hands to today? Yeah, that's going to impact our grandkids in the next generation. Because otherwise, I think if we don't start thinking like that, the way this whole thing's going, it just feels hopeless and like there's nothing we can do. But I always suggest there is something we can do.
Absolutely.
Because there's someone or something in our sphere of influence that we can impact for the positive that can change maybe our generational line for the better.
Yeah. Yeah, with us, our goal is to be good parents, right? And turn out good kids that are good citizens that make the world a better place. Okay, we're doing our part. Everybody else just needs to do the same damn thing. We can't worry about raising everybody else's kids, but I'd sure like them to put some thought into it and be present a little bit more and realize what they're leaving behind. And the world would be a hell of a lot better place, but it has to be one kid at a time, one set of parents at a time. So show up and be present.
Yep. Yeah, that's good. And last but not least, where would you be today without David Simmons?
Without David Simmons, well, most people know Richard Simmons. David Simmons is the not so gay, a brother of Richard Simmons. But he's really taught me a lot about shoeing horses and things like that, and
roping a lot too, right?
And some other things. Yeah, roping. Yeah, he's taught me quite a bit.
Well, I'm sure he'll hear this and be grateful that you finally gave him his due. Well, Buck, again, as always, thank you for your hospitality and your generosity. And again, I'm so excited about locking arms with you guys at the Pro-Am this fall.
Yeah,
and
it's going to be a fun chapter
when
to
is
open
it?
Up. It'll be August, third week in August.
Weekend in August.
Yeah.
And stay tuned because we'll start kind of sharing more about it as it gets closer and we figure out more of the details of what's this all going to look like. But
you bet. Yeah, it'll be fun. It's a good thing.
And people can find you on your website at
Brannaman.com.
Brannaman.com. And if they want to subscribe to the Buck channel, they can do all of that through there.
They can just Google the Buck channel.
Oh, okay. And that'll take them right to it.
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, go check that out. Bucks, thanks again.
My pleasure.
And thanks, guys. Adios for now.